Aloha. This video, anything close, real close. I just wanted to share a little update on my little fast that I'm doing right now. I did my first fast in like 2010. And it was the maple syrup and lemon juice fast, and that was like the only thing. Well, at that time I was so out of balance. I was eating like shit. I had an unhealthy, everything was all fucked up. But climb that shit. Sorry about that. Yeah, everything was fucked up. Everything was messed up, and I was just looking for like a way, like something to be better in my life at that time, because mostly everything was just based upon like the city and surviving. So I was working hard. I was, doing what I needed to survive, and it wasn't everything. So, hi. So when I got there, it was not what I thought it was gonna be. It was my heart wasn't in it. My focus, my drive, not only wasn't it not in it because I didn't know what I was doing, but like I didn't even know what my drive and all that stuff is. I had none. There was no energy or any kind of, there was nothing behind it. So this kind of segues into the last video and previous topics that I've been talking about, that talk about this kind of commercial version of change, this commercial version of enlightenment, awakening, and all that. We don't really challenge ourselves to go to the depths, because a lot of our depths are based upon, what the system has told us, or we're trained, we're conditioned to be weak-minded, weak-bodied, spiritually weak. It's just weak forever. And so I'm not even paying attention to this video. Let's sit right here. Y'all can see what I'm looking at. Hopefully it don't cut off when I turn it. I can't turn it around, so let's see where I'm at. Little river area. But yeah, I didn't have, I didn't have my heart in it. I didn't have anything. There was no roots, there was no anchors, there was nothing I had no point to do it. It was like, do this fast because everybody's doing this fast, or do this fast because it seems like the healthy thing to do. It's kind of like that Jenny Craig diet shit commercial stuff. It's the same thing. Basically what that world did was morph into the New Age community. And now you have people running around with their Jenny Craig spirituality, telling people how the world is and how all this other stuff is. But their meals are still, shrink wrapped and mailed to them on a regular basis. And it's not coming from anywhere organic. It's not coming from anywhere that's like them. It's based upon something else. This goes back into the reactionary truth that I was talking about in the last video, in comparison to like an internal or ancestral truth. Two different truths right there. Two different styles or hows or whys of truth in that observation. So that was the first time I did it, and that was 8 years ago. And since then, I had always thought in my head, like, after that fast, I realized that in order to understand what I was doing in my physical body that involves a fast, I had to first understand the spiritual and psychological reasons and benefits of a fast. And I had nowhere to put that. I had nowhere to... what I still perceived as... what was beneficial to me and whatever was going on was what, you know, like what was coming from like TV or social media, little stuff. It was just kind of like regurgitation. It wasn't really based upon any kind of like deep knowledge. Kind of like when you go into something half-assed, you don't really like. Anyway, just like I'm just kind of rambling, but I think these rambles, I know these rambles are beneficial to some people because I know I've been in that space. I only recently just kind of got out of that space, having realized like what our relationship is with food, what our relationship is with this body. So it's your mind making a choice to put food in your body. Your body has a relationship with this experience, and there's a code there that is completely different than what we've been told it is with the food pyramid and all that bullshit. So it's not as simple as, you know, don't eat meat and don't do this and don't do that and you should do this and you should do that. It's more so about finding out your balance, your personal... because our bodies are different. You think you're going to grow up in different parts of the world and your bodies, your entire genetic makeup is not going to be different? So this very generalized new age approach to our relationship with food and all this other stuff, this like just go vegan and all that other stuff, it's reactionary, like I said before in reference to the controlled opposition vegan agenda, which is out there to make it look like positive movement is happening, and to make it look like, you know, the system is changing and being more evolved because it's being more conscious of its relationship with the animals. It's not being more... It doesn't give a fuck about those animals. It doesn't give a fuck about you either. But what's happening is they're putting out this facade to create like these groups, these teams, just the same way it happened in Flat Earth. That's the way the system controls people. It's not so they don't have to control you individually. They just have to control bigger groups that you claim to be a part of. So when you join that crew or when you go in that group, then they don't have to have control over you. They just have to have control over the group. So this is what happened in Flat Earth, Truther community, Black Conscious community. Every kind of label is meant to kind of shrink down your maximum potential, like how far you could go. So the vegan agenda out there is out there not only to water down and overgeneralize and promote this new age sort of approach to what's going on, and also in that moment promote that whole like we're all human, we're all the same. Like it's not that simple. Look at what's happening to people based upon like vaccines. We know that there's an attack on particularly melanated people strictly from vaccines, so it's affecting us a certain way. You can go back to the simple nature of the sun reflecting off or us soaking up the energy of the sun based upon the melanin. Like there's relationship, there's a very obvious obvious relationship, difference of relationship that we have to the sun than certain other people. That same kind of difference in that extreme and in those complexities is exists not only in the food, but it exists inside everything else that we are doing on a regular basis, and we don't really recognize it because we're too bombarded by the bullshit that we're told to pay attention to. So I guess that was enough kind of like intro to this fast and how I'm feeling now. First thing that I felt yesterday, this is only day 3 too, so I'm not like on some crazy, oh, I did this fast. No, but 3 days is enough. 3 days is actually not really enough. Well, it is enough to kind of like open the door. But the 3 days is actually kind of like the day that you start getting your energy back, because your body's kind of in shock for like 3 days. So you start getting your energy back, and but the thing is, you got to get there, and it's all about the mind. It's all about like trying to find a place to sit where the sun is here, and all these rocks over there. It's wet. Let me change this. Yeah, so the main thing that I noticed was the clarity of focus. So it's not just the clarity, but the focus, the clarity within focus. So when I'm focusing on things, I felt like a different layer, a deeper layer of clarity. And in my clarity, I also felt feel a deeper layer of focus. So those, because they're two different things. When you're working, kind of like when I do videos, there's a very definite difference between the clarity and the focus. That's the whole point. But beyond that, the main point is we're constantly kind of like bombarding our bodies with stuff. So just see it as like a motor, because this is how it feels. Think of your body as like a car or something. There's a lot of different examples of ways to do this, but like it's like a car or something, and you put gasoline in it all the time, and you think that's the only way. Like you think that's the only thing that because that's the only thing you've known. But there's like biofuels out there, and then there's like these spiritual fuels, people who you are around, like fuel you, or they suck you dry. So there's all these various layers of fuel that are out here that in this simpleton ass minded society, we don't even really go into that. That's just as poo-pooed as fucking flat earth and all that other stuff. So we're dealing with people who are fighting themselves right now, including the people themselves, like me. Like literally, when I started this fast, like my body is literally telling me like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, what do you mean you're not gonna eat? and then my body's like, so what that does is it deepens the relationship. I never really thought about that, but that also deepens the relationship that you have, your mind has, your spirit has with your body once you do a fast. So that's another perk that happens that you wouldn't really recognize to the depths of that if you hadn't done that fast, because your body is constantly running on synthetic fuel. So that synthetic fuel, I wish I could just tie this to a stick. I'm gonna get a stick or some shit. So anyway, that synthetic fuel leaves toxins in our bodies, and those toxins get accumulated in our fat cells. They get accumulated in all kinds of stuff. There's even stuff that comes out of like your face, like your pores. Like when you scratch your nose, like this, I like not scratch my nose, but I like push all the shit out of my nose and like my pores in the shower. Like I get all that shit out, and it's like I noticed there was more like shit that I had to get rid of in my body when I was eating horribly. So when I was like eating like pizza like 3 times a week or something, there was like a few months ago, like if I was out drinking or whatever, or I had like a couple slices of pizza, day after next, go out, whatever, and then some. So that I would notice like, my fucking body feels like shit. Like there's all this stuff coming out of my pores and all this muck. And yeah, so that was kind of like my first inclination that I should start doing this. And this goes into my approach to the overall kind of expansion of what's my little journey. So just like I've said this before, when I was totally naive, I went into the Army at 17, and I went in because my heart was like, all right, do something of value, like do something that's gonna be worth, like something to your soul, like put something in there in the world. The only thing was available was, you know, just to, you know, serve your country and all that bullshit. So that was my unconscious engagement in the physical warfare world. Once I got out of the physical warfare consciousness, when I got out of the Army around the same times, right before I got out, which is what made me get out, I went into the mindset of psychological warfare. And that's when I still didn't even know what I was talking about because I was going to school. I was in the Cal State system at that time as an English major, and I was just like, well, just, you know, do two things at once, you know, do this and, you know, still study and all that stuff. So that's what I did. So my study actually overtook my schooling. My internal studying overtook my schooling to where it made me drop out because I started to see things in the world differently. More clearly, actually. And so that was a psychological warfare I was going into. After I got out of that, I went into, or after once I got in there, that's when I started going into the Occupy movement. So it was protesting. So this was the psychological, in that space, that was a transition world between the psychological warfare and a spiritual warfare, or at least understanding what that is. And in order to go into the depths of clearing and understanding, understanding, and overstanding all of that stuff, you have to actually go through it. So you can be aware of it from one level of consciousness, like from the psychological warfare level of consciousness. You can be aware of an understanding of the spiritual warfare, but you will never be able to understand, understand, and overstand the spiritual warfare until you have completely you just like you went through the process of clearing all of that toxic shit out of your psychological warfare, and have kind of like anchored yourself more in the intentional space of unlocking, unveiling, and realizing what the spiritual warfare is. So that's where I was in the Occupy movement. So this is the same thing that was. So when I went out of that, I went into like the New Age community, and that was me like understanding what the spiritual warfare was and all that shit from a personal space. And then from a personal space, when I was in that community, I broke out because I didn't adopt any of that bullshit for the long term. Because at the time, you do get caught up in that vortex of shit. What was I saying? I forgot what I was saying. Oh, okay. So the spiritual warfare. So that's the thing too. That's another part of it. It's kind of like the subconscious and the subconscious. In order to understand, understand, and overstand, you have to first. You also have to take into account the micro and the macro parts of that story. So an example of that is like what I was saying when I went into the New Age community. I couldn't understand, and overstand, or even comprehend what a spiritual warfare looks like on the outside of me on a macro scale until I first experienced it and had that shit happen to me personally on a micro scale. So on a micro scale, now it was kind of like a personal interest of mine to be like, man, fuck this. This affected me this way. And then I look around and I see that shit still happening to people everywhere. So I get used to this fucking camera. So on this same space, on a macro scale of my approach to my micro world, I started to see that was like the system for me, at least. It was like, okay, you got a micro and a macro of each level of consciousness. You got a micro of the physical warfare, you got a micro and a macro of the physical warfare, and all the way up the line, psychological, spiritual, so on and so forth. And I use warfare in a sense just to use it as a comparison, an observational comparison, also to know that if there is a warfare, then there are weapons here, there are strengths here, there's fuel here, there's something in. If you're being hit by a psychological and spiritual warfare, then that means that you also have capabilities within that spiritual and psychological warfare. But you won't realize what that is if you're too bombarded by all this bullshit in the physical level of consciousness. And this is what this system and this establishment is doing on the micro and the macro scale of every world that's happening right now, especially in the mainstream media. They just made it a profession out of it. So I started to realize that, and then kind of like integrate that into my process, my world, my work, my art, and all that other stuff. And started to realize that, well, for me personally, my approach needs to, if I'm going to work on my body, I have to first work on, I'll keep in mind my body and everything, but on the overall scale, my main focus is going to be what is going to affect my body from the top down, like from the highest vibration. So I had to start with the spiritual relationship that I had, and then work my way through the psychological and then to the physical. This is why I'm only focusing so much on my physical now, after having gone into the depths of like the spiritual and the psychological warfare and all that other stuff that's out there, is because I needed time to spiritually and psychologically understand what it was that I was actually doing with my body. This involves relationships, this involves sex, this involves food, everything. Everything is involved in this. And I knew I wasn't going to be ready to do that, or wasn't going to be able to do that as efficiently as I would like to have, if I hadn't first, cleared and processed at least the majority of the spiritual and psychological shit that was going on in my world. Then make it back to the physical, because then it'll be easier. And I realized this 8 years ago when I was in that fast, because I realized in that moment, fasting is more about your mind, just like everything else is more about your mind. It's kind of like being subjected to your emotions, rather than in a moment or interaction or something like that, subjected to, like, you can either instinctively in your level of consciousness react emotionally to a moment, or you can process what's going on from a higher level of consciousness. The system doesn't want you to do that because it's easier to control people when they're chaotic. So your body has to be chaotic, your mind has to be chaotic, your spirit has to be chaotic, or at least disconnected, which is another form of chaos. Not completely disconnected, just kind of you can never be disconnected, but it's a world of like, okay, well, what does, yeah, you know what I mean. So yeah, they can't disconnect you, but you can turn off a lot of your capabilities. You can turn off a lot of your qualities in this experience that make it easier for you to be enslaved. So once I started that fast and started asking those questions and just getting all that garbage out of my everyday, sort of like constantly filling my body with something. What was that I was filling myself with? A lot of the times it wasn't, most of the times nowadays when you're looking around, you can't find anything healthy. It's like today when I went in here and hopefully end it on this. I went into, because I don't think I finished it. I was talking about the fast last time. So this time the fast that I'm doing, it's not so much. It started. I was like, I know it's by my mind. I keep my water intake going, but I don't really need too like the maple syrup and all that other stuff. I just want to see what I could do with nothing, or if anything, one thing. That would be mostly water. And what I came to research, and I shared this in the Instagram compilation, was eating grapes, seeded grapes, while you're fasting. I'd imagine that'd be a lot easier, to make the fast a lot easier. But in this world, I went to 3 grocery stores, all of them supposedly organic grocery stores, or Whole Foods, a little local one, and then Natural Grocers, which is another kind of smaller one. This one, I don't know. I think you can see it. So I went there. The Whole Foods ain't had shit, only seedless grapes, supposedly organic. Ain't no fucking seedless organic grapes. It's an oxymoron. So Whole Foods, it's basically like what the whole system is telling you about, health and all that. Anyway, I don't go on there. You know about that shit. So Whole Foods, seedless grapes. Natural Grocers, seedless grapes. Little mom and pop organic place, seedless grapes. I asked the lady I asked her at the register, because I was looking. Came back, because this is a place where you can order stuff too. Came back and asked her, is it possible to get grapes with seeds in them here? Because they do that with other kind of herbs and stuff like that if you need it. And I asked her, she looked at me like I was like something was wrong with me. She said, why are you asking for that? I said, because there ain't nothing organic about a seedless anything. And she said, oh, okay, well, I don't see any reason why any place would carry grapes with seeds in them, because nobody wants them. That's what she said. We don't have them because nobody wants them. So this is what's happening. Society is dictating. Oh shit! Society is dictating. What is healthy and all this other shit based upon this water. You get caught up in this water. Based upon like what she said. Nobody wants that. Or nobody knows. It's because people are being enslaved and poisoned because they are engaged in this synthetic fuel world, this synthetic psychological fuel, spiritual fuel world. And by the time most people by the numbers are ready to or figure anything out, they're already in their midlifes and all that other stuff, and the new age there is to swipe them right up, catch them up, tell them everything they just escaped from, that negative world, all that garbage of politics and Trump and all that stuff. That's not a part of who you are. You should just be positive forever, and we'll just be positive. So this is what's happening on the other side of the mainstream media. So in the New Age community, which is the next space that people or the system is trying to run into or push people into, it's just an escapist overcompensation from the negative world. So now you jump from an overly destructive, self-destructive, so-called negative world, but it's not as simple as negative. It's not as simple as negative and positive. That shit just been hijacked. This experience is baseline negative and positive, electric and magnetic, light and dark, so on and so forth. But they turn that into good and bad, and then they tell you they're the officials on what's good and what's bad. and your very existence is bad. In this world, your very existence, if you come from an indigenous lineage, your very existence is a threat to this world. So anything that's of value to you is garbage, it's irrelevant, it's primitive, it's savage, it doesn't matter. And on the extreme cases, you're a fucking criminal. So, fuck it. They don't matter. The only words that matter are our words. And that's the status quo of society right now on a macro and a micro scale. And this is why people are so sick and all the time, sick and everything, because we're too busy looking outside trying to point the finger on what's going on. Meanwhile, we're putting all these poisons in our body. That's the real war. The real war is what you're doing to and what we're doing to ourselves. But they want you to they want to tell you that the real war, because they want to focus everything on the micro. Because what they can do is provide you fillers for the micro. But once you start talking about the macro, that's when you become a threat to the system. Because they can't control the macro. If you merely talk about the macro, you will unveil their crimes. You will unveil the system's gross negligence and not even a reason for existing. You'll unveil all that shit. So this is why your micro body and mind and soul has to be tied up and chaotic in order to maintain the control of all the rest of the people out there. This goes in this is for people, also for people who can't understand how racism is in the discussion of so-called truth. Racism was a way to control people psychologically, physically, and spiritually. So when we talk about that truth, what do people have who are getting something from the system, a privilege or whatever it is, whether they acknowledge it or not? Since they are getting something of a benefit from that system, subconsciously and unconsciously, they're not going to be able to say or do anything about that, because that would be like somebody telling on themselves. So in order to not even tell on themselves, what they do is act ignorant and act like only certain truths matter. Flat Earth truth matters over here, and yoga and meditation matters over here, but racism that's involved in everybody's life around the whole fucking world, it don't matter. That's where we are right now. And that's what it's boiling down to. The people either being able to get out of that prepositioned mind trap, soul trap, physical trap, and go through that process. So that's what this video I wanted to do. I wanted to share like an example of the process of change and the process of like looking at oneself and their involvement in what's going on, and you know, just kind of taking it day by day, not really going into, you know, this is what you need to be doing, like that whole vegan agenda and all that. Man, fuck you, man. I'll be the first one to say, man, fuck all those vegans out there who ain't saying shit about all the other truths that are involved with crimes against people. Motherfuckers are all worried about what's happening to animals. They don't give a fuck about the people. So that's another way to keep people away from like loving and connecting with themselves. See, the whole pet and animal agenda, it goes back to the evolution, monkey evolution theory. All that is also tied into the New Age program, which makes everybody think that you're just a fraction of an evolutionary step from a monkey. But it also ingrains in you that you're just a helpless, dirty, primitive and savage. Deep down in your genetics, you're still just that monkey. So that gives subconsciously and unconsciously the okay to society and this busted ass idea of a civilization. It gives them the okay to act like fucking animals and bomb everything and destroy everything and burn everything down and poison the fucking sky and poison the water, poison your mind, poison the whole fucking world, because you still think you're a fucking monkey. You still think you're a fucking animal from the Big Bang and all that. You have no purpose. You have no meaning. You have no power. You have no connection to your roots. You have no connection to your culture. You have no connection to your fucking family in any kind of way. Your brother, sister, your mother, your father, your aunt, your uncle, your cousins. All that shit is broken. All that shit is on purpose. All that shit is designed to affect the entire macro movement. And this goes, I'm looping it all back to, like I was saying, our relationship with the body. We're constantly filling our body with all this, I need breakfast, lunch, and fucking dinner. I gotta eat all this shit. I need a fucking bacon and eggs and toast and orange juice and all this shit. English muffins and a little fruit on the side, like all that shit. Like, we got it backwards. we eating the wrong shit. And you don't need to eat as much either. And that's the thing, they fatten you up to anchor you down. But they fatten you up, they anchor you into a codependent world. You gotta keep kind of like a drug addiction. You get fat, you need more food. You need more, in order to get more food, you need more money. In order to get more money, you need to go back into the system a little more. So the more fat people you got, the more people that gonna get caught up in that world. The other side of that is the relationship, like with your kids. So they separate you and your kids, and they're fattening up your psyche with all this bullshit social media. You're getting fat, and what's happening? They're anchoring you down psychologically. Spiritually, you've been fat every fucking day. Going to church every fucking Sunday, weekly, you're getting spiritually fat. Or you're getting spiritually guilty because every Sunday that passed, what happened? You didn't go to church. You didn't do anything. So every week you're getting hit with this internal guilt because you don't have a relationship with the biggest part of who you are. All this boils down to chaos. All this boils down to the way the system has manipulated every single angle of your complex system. And it's not like each and everybody who is in the establishment is aware of every fucking thing. No, it's not like that. This is years and years and years of machinery, psychological and spiritual machinery that's been active in our worlds for generations. So all these fake ass kind of bubblegum truther ass people who are talking about, it's just a simulation, we're just you guys are making it too complex. You know why it's too complex to people? When you start talking about the human body, your culture, what's happening historically to the people, when you start really going into the nuts and bolts of the shit, not just referencing it so they can sell you their simulation or reality breakdown agenda. No. Lost my fucking train of thought. Anyway. So, I said enough. I'm done. I don't even know how long this is gonna record all this. Anyway, that's pretty much it. I just wanted to share kind of a little update of this, fast. I'm just gonna keep going as long as I can because I feel good, and I know, like, internally that I don't need so much, in order to process, and I'm doing a lot of things. I'll keep people updated. Hopefully this goes. I want to go like as long as I can. I want to push this like all the way because I want to see what's happening to like my body. Like, I want to know what's happening. I know it's going to affect my dreams. I know it's going to affect my mind. I know it's going to affect like my health. There's a lot of clearing that comes from all this stuff. So I recommend it for anybody from the first day, even if you only do 3 days. Challenge yourself. Find some seeded grapes and start slow, and don't come down on. Don't be so hard on yourself. If you don't make it or you don't do what you're gonna do, like, fuck it. Like I tried it in 2010. I never thought about doing it again. I thought about doing it again, but I never even like went into actually doing it again. until now, because I knew that there was something else that I was missing. I didn't want to just jump into that and be like, oh yeah, this is it. No, I wanted to be able to feel and interpret and read my body from a psychological and spiritual perspective that I didn't have before. I didn't have that 8 years ago. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I just did it because it was trendy and hip, and maybe it popped up on a Facebook post at the time or some shit. But now it's something deeper. So that is a good example of the kind of change approach that the system is pushing. They want you to get into that not knowing what the fuck is going on change, new age change, because they know that you're not going to hold the line. You're not going to be able to make it. You're not going to be able to do anything with that that energy. It'll just be, they'll give you, it's kind of like when they give you a little something, but they know in the long run, in a macro scale, you ain't going to do anything with it. So they'll give you a little flat earth. They'll give you a little truth here and there. They'll give you a little fasting and organics and all that other shit. But are you dealing with the macro scale? Nope. Ain't do a fucking thing. Ain't talking about it. Because you're doing exactly what they told you to do. React to the subjects that they say and deem are important based upon their illusory ass synthetic authority that they created from stealing all this fucking land and putting up all their bullshit ass stories about how we should live our fucking life. So on that note, thank you for joining me. Until next time, from all my relations, peace, love, and harmony.